until we founded Holycode, I was never bootstrapping. So any company I founded from day one, basically, we had investors, right? So for a long time, this was the only modus operandi I knew was find money, grow 100% per year if possible, and find more money. So that does change quite a bit if you're bootstrapped. You have just more leeway, not in financial resources, obviously, but you go at the pace that you can, right? You define what you're doing, for example, how much time are you going to invest into product market fit and these sort of things. As soon as you have venture money, that turns quite a lot. So then it's really a lot about growth. Doesn't matter so much whether you have product market fit because you just need to grow 50%, rather 100% per year. So it becomes a very, at least in my experience, it becomes a very revenue driven game, because without enough revenue, you won't close the next round. Without closing the next round, your VC that put in money into you will lose his investment, right? So it's very, and I'm over exaggerating this a bit, but it becomes a bit one-dimensional, so to speak. So I think it's a very important decision to make. Are you at the point where you're ready to scale like that? Because if you're not, you might just end up in a really bad spot because you don't have product market fit, or you have big areas that you need to solve first before you can really focus on growing the company like hell. And if you do that prematurely, because VCs will require you to do so, you just add a lot more stress onto your company. That's simplified. It's not always that easy, right? You need the money to run the company, so it's somewhere in between. But especially in the current environment, I always tell to people, bootstrap as long as you can, as long as you see progress. If it's flat, yeah, then probably that's not the right thing anymore. But as long as you see progress, bootstrap as long as you can, until you really feel this point where, okay, with extra money now, we will surely be able to pick up a lot of speed. And that's probably the right moment to go into VC. But it changes the surroundings quite drastically.
Yeah, so that was also kind of when you have a base and you can scale it, like Laurent also said, I think then you can do it. And I think there was also in our case where we have a proven market, we sold already products, we could prove that, and then we thought, okay, now we can grow very fast or we can grow middle fast, and then you just decide. And I would say there are three very important things. Like one is really the market, to see what is your competition doing. So when they're very quick, you need to go fundraising because then you need to be quicker. And the other thing is your business model. Like said, with hardware, if you have a very capital intense one, I think sooner or later, you need to go fundraising. And the third thing is kind of your vision, your goals. What do you want at the end? Do you want to go to an IPO? You want to be the biggest company in the world, or you want to be a bit of a bootstrapped, but maybe a very freedom company where you are with your team, you can do what you want and you build your dream. I mean, that could also be a dream of yourself. And I think that's the three things we're always considering and thinking about that.
If I may add to that last point, Patrick, I think that's a really good one. I think if you go down the VC route, it has to be with the vision of being the number one in your market and potentially doing an IPO, because that's what the VCs expect of you, right? It's either this or don't do it at all, right? But that's sort of like I'm always trying to make it as simplified as possible, so it's oversimplified. On the other side, the bootstrapping, you have much more flexibility on where you want to go, but it's also more frustrating because you're missing a lot of the funds. You have to make a lot of decisions where, you could maybe do this, but you don't have the funds to, run this campaign or add this person to your team. So maybe you will not shoot that much for the stars in a shorter term, but you can still get very successful in the long term, and you own a bigger share of your own company, and you have more, as you said, Patrick, more freedom to decide. So both things have their beauty and their pros. I think one thing that VC is doing really well is obviously it gets you a lot of publicity. You raise around, everybody hears about it. You get a certain, you get a better connection through the VCs because they have a good network and all of these things that are missing when you're bootstrapping. To me, bootstrapping feels much more like working in the shadows. Like working hard for yourself. And unless you're really great at marketing, like Nicolas is with Nikin, I mean, they did an amazing job. But usually, bootstrap companies are much less known, and they become hidden champions in their areas. Versus VC cases, are most of the time when they're successful, everybody in the industry knows about them because of their funding rounds and the people that they hired and the people that talk about them. So I think that's also one area that that you have to be aware. It doesn't mean you're doing a bad job if you don't get the same publicity. It just means maybe you've gone down the other way, right?
I mean, it's kind of a bit the pressure which is coming. When you don't fundraise, you just have so little money, you can't pay a lot of salaries. And so it's not just me that I felt the pressure. So it's also my co-founders, which their teams come and ask for more money, for higher salaries and stuff like that. I mean, in the beginning, like we also heard, it very helps because the people which you have are people which are intrinsically motivated, which want to go with you and with your vision. But later on, you get certain pressures, and I think this pressure is everyone feeling.
Very specific towards each product, right? So let's say you're building something that is in the direct to consumers or D2C market. If you can, I mean, maybe, Greg Eisenberg and these sort of people from the US, if you can, I think the best way to go about it is try to build a community, try to sell products as simplified as possible before you start investing too much into a tech platform, because then you don't need to get a lot of money to prove that it works, right? So try to defer building this big platform as long as you can. If you're in the B2B SaaS, this can also work, but if you're in the B2B SaaS enterprise, this is extremely difficult because the enterprise customers expect you to come with a full-scale, fully functioning solution that needs to look shiny and glossy. In such cases, I don't think you can bootstrap it. There, I think you will need to get some sort of investment to get your first initial product out. So I think it's all about how little can you go with your MVP. The smaller you can go, the better, because it needs less money and you buy yourself time to do the product market fit and learn before you get money. But in certain cases, I think it's unfortunately inevitable. Also, probably deep tech or hardware areas, at some point you just need money. I don't think it's possible without it. But it's very specific to each individual industry or product. So yeah, my advice, simplified, would be reduce your proof of concept or your MVP to the smallest possible version. Try to find hacks and ways around it so you don't need to raise money until you know that this is the thing that's going to work. Otherwise, you might run off in a very bad direction early on, and the U-turn then will be very difficult to do.
I see quite similar, I would also say. And an important factor on this side is also the supply chain, I would say, when you need to pre-finance stuff which you, I don't know, build somewhere in Asia or somewhere, and then you have a 1 or 2 months transportation or a supply chain time, then you have another problem again. And I would say the banks, they're not here to finance that in the first years. So that's the bit of contra which you have. So when you're very young, having a long supply chain, then you need the funding from the beginning as well. And later on, maybe a bank can help you with the cash flow, but in the beginning, that's tough to find someone financing that for you.